so we've got a couple months.
You have a lot of time to prepare.
Yeah.
And have you taken it before?
I've just taken the PSAT.
Okay.
I took the NMSQT in October, and then the local PSAT
Do you remember
this fall.
what you scored on the PSAT?
Yes, the first time I took it was in the spring, and I got a 1200, and then the second time was an 1150.
Okay. And which did you do better? Was your scores in math? How did you score in math compared to the others?
The first time I scored a 590 in math, and then the second time was a 630 in math.
Okay, so you're pretty good in math. I primarily am a math tutor.
Okay.
And I can definitely help you improve your math score.
Mhm.
And in the last 2 years, I've also been a presenter for Sycamore Learning Company on all of the SAT subjects. So the English and the writing and reading, I can also help you a little bit with if you need help.
Okay.
What are you primarily looking for help in? Is it just math or?
I'm just kind of looking for help kind of all across the board, just trying to get those extra few points and hopefully get some more scholarship money.
Uh-huh. Have you attended any seminar that presents kind of an overall strategy for taking the test?
No, I have not.
Okay. So it might be worth me going through some of the reading and writing stuff from my presentation that I do. But today, this initial session is only a half hour long.
Mhm.
It's my free introductory session that I offer people. So I'm going to suggest that we look at one of these online practice tests.
Okay.
And this is put out by the people who make the SAT test. So if there is, there's lots of people that put out practice booklets. There's Barron's, there's Princeton Review, there's McGraw-Hill. But I think the one that does the best job is the people who actually put out the test.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking at here. So why don't we spend 20 minutes today going through some of these math problems, and I can get a little bit of a feel for your current math skills, although it sounds like they're pretty good if you're scoring near 600 on the PSAT. There's not that big a difference between the PSAT and the SAT.
Okay.
Okay, and in fact, the maximum score on the PSAT is only like 1760. So your 600 is more impressive on the PSAT than it would be on the SAT. So you're familiar that the math starts out by giving you all of these formulas.
Mhm.
And the only thing I would suggest is not necessarily that you certainly don't have to memorize it, because you can always look at this page, but look through it and make sure you understand what each of the variables means and how to do it. And we won't go through that here. Let's just start on some of the questions. And the way I can do this is I have a drawing tablet on my end.
Mhm.
If I can get it to function, I do. There we go. And then I can write on this. So let's look at number one.
All right.
So these, in case you don't know, on the SAT, it starts out easy and then goes to medium, and then goes to hard.
Okay.
So, and it restarts every section like that. In other words, when you get to the grid in questions, you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
They start over again, easy, medium, hard. So each subsection goes easy, medium, hard. So you know that the first problems are going to be easy.
All right.
Okay, so do you know it? If you can give me an answer, I'll just go to the next one.
Pardon?
If you want to give me an answer on number 1 and it's correct, I'll go to the next one. If you don't know how to do it, we'll review it. That's usually the way what I do on tutoring. Is if the student can answer the problem, then I assume you know the math involved on number 1. And so we'll go to number 2.
All right.
So how about number 1? What do you get?
All right. I would choose D10.
Okay, you got it. How about number 2? What math are you currently taking, Izzy, in high school?
Precalculus.
Pre-calc trig or just pre-calc?
Just pre-calc. We have algebra 2 trig.
Did you already take that?
Yes, and I already took that one.
So you've had trig. Oh, good. That'll come in handy. There is some trig on this test. So your pre-calc is probably beyond what is needed. This test is primarily algebra, geometry, and a little bit of trig. And a little bit of imaginary numbers, but not hard stuff on imaginary numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you add 2 complex numbers? How do you add that to that?
Oh, man, I'm not sure I remember that.
You add the real parts, and then you add the imaginary parts.
Oh, so you combine the like terms?
Yeah, in other words, it's really easy. You add that to that, and then you add that to that. So what do you get for an answer?
You would get A.
What's 7 plus a negative 8?
A -1.
Oh, you said A. Okay.
Yes.
I thought you said 8.
Oh.
Okay, so you had no problem with that one. Okay.
All right.
Let's look at number 3.
All right, so I would choose C for that one.
Yeah, and that's correct. And
okay.
I don't want to go on yet because I want to talk about something else on number 3. This is a classic problem where you can use a different technique. Now, number 3 is not hard. It was pretty easy. It was just multiplying, okay? Most people would be able to do that. But if you throw in another variable and it needs to be a divisor, then it starts getting really complicated. And it's often hard to figure out exactly what it is. And so this lends itself to a technique that I call picking numbers. In other words, when you're answering all of these SAT math problems, there's 3 ways to basically answer each question. You can do it algebraically. You can do it by back solving, where you start with the answers and see if they're correct.
Okay.
And you can do it by picking numbers. Now, picking numbers is frequently a technique that allows you to take a really difficult question and make it really quite easy. This isn't a difficult question, but I'm still going to go over the technique for you.
Okay.
Now, where you should look for this to apply it is when you see variables in the question and every answer has those 2 same variables.
Okay.
When you see that, it means that M and P can be anything. Okay? So let's say that we were a little confused on this and we couldn't get it. We couldn't figure out whether it was C or not. Well, how can I guarantee if I say your life depends on it? Well, let's make up some numbers for M. I'm going to let M equal, and you make up small numbers like 2 and 3. Try to avoid using the numbers 0 and 1. Okay? For reasons that aren't totally clear, but 0 and 1 hold certain mathematical properties that are unique, and so they don't always work really well when you're picking numbers. So I do want to pick small numbers because it makes the math easier. So I'm going to pick M equal 2, P equal 3. So if M equals 2, how many texts does Armand send out?
10.
How many texts does Tyrone send out if P equals 3?
12.
So we know that a total should be 22. Now, if we didn't know how to formulate it, is all we have to do is go through each of these answers and plug in 2 for M and 3 for P. Well, that's not, and find out which one equals 22. Well, A does not, B does not, C. If I plug in 2 for M and 3 for P, I get 22. So there's my answer without really knowing how to do it. Okay? And I didn't have to pick 2 and 3. I could have picked 5 and 7. And I would have come up with the same strategy. It just wouldn't have been 22. It would have been 5 times 5, so it would have been 25, and 7 times 4, 28. So I would have been looking for an answer that was 53. But that's the strategy of picking numbers. And like I said, it works better on really tough problems. Whereas this one was easy enough that it wasn't that hard to, in your head, be able to figure out that it had to be 5m plus 4p.
Okay.
All right, let me scroll down here and let's have a look at number 4. Go ahead and take a look at that one. And another piece of advice when taking the SAT test is to always look at your answers before you attempt to solve it. Because a lot of times, that'll tell you kind of what direction to go in. If you're not totally sure. Okay. So what do you think 108 means?
I'm going to guess that that's how many she starts with.
Perfect. B.
Okay.
Yeah, this one right here.
Alright.
Okay. Scroll down. Now, what I really like about these practice tests is that they give you a lot of problems that involve like 3 to 5 different math principles. I'm not sure these are actually examples of problems that you're going to see on the test, but if you can do these problems, you're learning all of the individual math principles. So on number 5, I have a polynomial minus another polynomial. So how do I do this? How do I subtract polynomials?
So you distribute that minus sign to all the terms in the second polynomial.
Okay, in order to remove the parentheses, that's what I would do. So I guess one way I could do it, I don't need the initial parentheses. The parentheses on the term on the left are totally unnecessary because they just are. They're there
Okay.
for clarification, but they really aren't necessary. Now, when I distribute that negative sign to each term, so all I have to do is change the sign on each term. And now combine like terms. So start with that. How many x squared y's do we find?
2.
Okay, what are they total?
So it'd be 2xy squared, or x squared y's. Sorry.
Okay, that takes care of that term and that term. Let's start with the next one. How many y squared terms do we have?
None.
Correct. How many xy squared terms do we have?
2.
Plus 2. And that looks like we took care of everything. So that's the answer we're looking for. Bingo. As with a lot of these, having multiple choice doesn't really, in this one, it doesn't help at all. In other words, you have to solve the problem.
Okay.
Some problems, it really does help if you can back solve or pick numbers. Let's look at number 7, one of my favorite problems. And I'm going to give you a hint on number 7. It's an easy problem. Hold on, I do have to scroll down just a notch so you can see the last answer choice. Okay. It looks like a hard problem, does it not?
Yes, it looks very difficult.
It's horrible. In fact, let's just talk about another thing. The way I think a person should take the SAT test on the math particularly is to go through the test, the entire test, and do all the problems you think you can do. Put a check mark by everything else. Second pass, do all the problems first pass, do all the problems you can do. Second pass, do all the problems you think you can do. And third pass, do everything else if you still have whatever time you have remaining. Time is definitely a factor, as I'm sure you've seen. Very few people end up answering all 60 questions in the 60 minutes that are allowed. So sometimes you might take a look at this and put a check mark there and say, I'll look at this later. In other words, I would not spend more than 2 minutes on any problem the first pass through. The reason this is an easy problem is look at all the answers. Everything is in terms of the things that are in parentheses, okay?
Okay.
So let me give you another problem. Can you solve that equation for P? Hold on. Forgot that -1 there. In other words, this equation right there, do you know how to solve it for P?
I think so.
What would you do? What would the first step be?
My first step, I would move P to the other side.
Well, usually you want to isolate what you're solving
Okay.
for. So what we really want to do is get rid of everything else. In other words, I want to multiply everything by c minus 1. And then I want to divide everything by a times b. So you would end up with the following.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that as a clue, how do you solve that for p? And all of this stuff they're giving you is totally irrelevant. In other words, SAT tries to confuse you. They're telling you what P is, what R is, what N is. None of it matters. Because all
Would it be
they're really asking you to do is solve that equation for P.
okay? So then, if you solved for p, then your answer would be b.
Yes.
Okay.
In other words, that's the new numerator, and there's your
Mm-hmm.
new denominators. And there's the m that it's multiplying by. So
Oh.
it maybe wasn't a super easy problem because you got to be able to solve that equation for p,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the same as what you're doing there. It's just the a is that, and the b
Mm-hmm.
is that, and the c is that. But you're using exactly the same strategy as you would to solve that simple equation. Now, this is one of those problems where, oh my goodness, first of all, everybody's going to read this paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're going to say, wow, should I try to take that to the nth power and this to the nth power? What should I do? In other words, you could get absolutely lost in the algebra trying to do this problem if you, in any way, shape, or form, try to expand it. But luckily, if you look at the answers first, and that's the key, is if you look at the answers first, you see everything is still in terms of all of these complicated expressions.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. That one is, that one is, that one is. And so you should get the idea that we don't really have to know what R is or N or M or P. Because all I have is an algebraic equation to solve by multiplying by the denominator and then dividing by the numerator.
All right.
So that's just a problem that really looks hard and is actually fairly easy. How about number 6? Let's finish it up with number 6.
All right. I'm gonna say that it's 3.
Yeah, you're familiar with y equals mx plus b.
Mm-hmm.
That's the slope. That's the rate of change. Well, that's in that exact format. Y equals mx plus b. So if you want to know the rate of change each year, it's the slope. Now, this is a problem where if you didn't know that, there are various methods you could use to figure it out. You could try plugging in some numbers for A. In other words, it's between the ages of 2 and 5. So if I plug in A of 2, I get 3 times 2 plus 28.6. That's H of 2. And if I want to know what H of 3 is, then it's 3 times 3 plus 28.6. Well, the estimated increase between that and that is 3. And it's always that slope. That's what slope, that's why they spend so much time teaching you about slope, is that it's such an important concept. It's not so much the slope of a straight line that's important, it's the
Mm-hmm.
rate of change. when you get to calculus, what year are you in, Izzy?
I'm a junior.
You're a junior, so you probably will take Calc AB next year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you wanted to define calc in one short series of words, it's the instantaneous rate of change, which is the same as slope, only slope is the average rate of change on a straight line. Whereas if you have curved line like that and you want to know what the slope is right there, it's not so obvious. In other words, slope is rise over run, but your rise is 0 and your run is 0. So that's what calculus is all about, is figuring out how you do the instantaneous rate of change. But that's also why they spend so much time teaching you about slope in algebra through pre-calc. Okay. All right, let's stop there. Let me write one thing. Have you been to my website at all, Izzy?
Yes, I have.
Did you go to algebra to calculustutor.com?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I do have another one. It's maybe a little bit more user friendly. It's called Digital Math Tutor. A little easier to spell, if nothing else. But if you go to Digital Math Tutor, you can sign up just like you could on Algebra to Calculus. And you can also pay a little bit easier. And I do ask anybody that doesn't live in Denver to prepay for their sessions.
Okay.
And, you know, I give the first half hour free, but then, and you can schedule half hour sessions, which would be $16 per half hour session, or a full hour is $32. Okay. And each session is going to be pretty similar to what we did today. We'll just go through practice tests. If you want to spend some time on the English and reading, I do have like a PowerPoint presentation that I can kind of go through with you. It's a little different than just going through problems on practice tests. I give you some tips on punctuation, on sentence structure, on writing style, things like that. So anyway, I will let you go, and hopefully we'll work together before you take your test. I think I can help you. And I hope this works for you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I will talk to you again soon.
All right, Izzy. Bye-bye. You can close out of the GoToMeeting by just clicking on the X in the upper right-hand corner.
Okay.
Bye-bye.